On YouTube, I got a question. How do I get my podcast, The Worthy Podcast, submitted for a teardown? Well, Steve, ask and you will receive. Let's look at the Worthy Podcast, Diversity Leadership Coaching. First thing I did was I looked for it on Google. Interestingly, the first result is Worthy Celebrating the Value of Women. And he shows up in the Google Podcast episode feature there. We have quite a few results actually that are not the Worthy Podcast that Steve hosts. And this might be something we can address. So let's look at just how things look here. One idea is, if we look at the description, Steve Worthy, the host of the Worthy Podcast, we help Black and minority listeners accelerate their leadership journey. That is the slogan right there. If you've seen my other teardowns, you know that this is something I talk about quite a bit. So let's go into design mode here, and I'll edit this. So we don't need to reiterate the show title. Let's just delete all that. We help Black and minority listeners accelerate their leadership journey. Have less filler words. You might go by discussing. Maybe we could do that by discussing diversity, leadership, and executive coaching. So let's delete that. Another suggestion is to change your podcast's title so that it's distinct from the other shows named Worthy. So we can even copy what they've done here, Worthy Celebrating the Value of Women. So we could put Worthy Leadership Development or Worthy Career Acceleration, something to distinguish your podcast from the other shows named Worthy, and giving people something to search, something that they can remember. Okay, Worthy Leadership Development Podcast, and they can type that in. And search engines generally are looking at the podcast title more than anything else. The description also important. So that's something you might want to consider, changing the title. I notice you have a podcast trailer here that gets a big thumbs up from me. I think we could probably improve the way it looks though. I think you'll want to, in the title, actually describe who this podcast is for. So in the title, helping something like this might be helpful. And I think many of your titles could actually be tweaked just a little bit. Think about how people might be searching for the topic you're covering in the episode and frame your episode titles around that. Recently, I featured Grace McJones's podcast, and I think she does a great job of this. 5 most in-demand tech jobs, a beginner's guide to quantum computing. So these are search terms that people might be looking for, and applying that to your show here will be a big improvement. So let's jump over to Transistor's preview tool, transistor.fm/preview, and let's look at, we'll put leadership career as the topic. I don't know if that'll bring up anything. There we go. There's a bunch of podcasts with that title, and we're going to put The Worthy Show. That's your current title, and let's upload your artwork as well. All right, so how does your podcast cover art and title, how does it compare? Compared to a lot of this cover art, yours looks really professional, which is good because that's what your podcast is about. I think, like we've mentioned, the main thing to change is the title so that when folks are comparing your show to other shows, they can see, oh yeah, this is about leadership development. That's what I'm into, and improves the chance that they'll click through on your show. One thing we could test, however, is this background color really seems to stand out. We have a lot of white backgrounds, and so I wonder, one thing we could try is, I've just pulled your artwork into some image editing software, and we could try adding a different background color and seeing how that, if that stands out compared to the other options. So let's try that. We've choose this new podcast cover art preview, and it does stand out a little bit nicer than just having a white background. So maybe something you want to look at is changing the background color, changing the color scheme so that your cover art pops a little bit more to this kind of bland white background that a lot of other folks are using. And one more thing to look at is, why is your website down here showing up so far down the page? This might be something to look into with Buzzsprout and see why the actual podcast page here is not showing up. It could be because in the URL, it's just a number. Having Worthy Leadership Podcast in the URL slug might be helpful. And again, maybe changing the title to something like Worthy Leadership Podcast so that when people search for those keywords, it's more likely that they find your show in Google results. Hopefully that was helpful. If you or anybody else wants to have multiple podcasts on the same account and not be charged for each additional new show you create, Transistor, which is the company I co-founded, allows you to have multiple podcasts on the same account. You can create new shows just by clicking that button. You can import an existing podcast from a different provider. We also provide a custom website that allows you to use a custom domain. In this case, it's Make Stuff Club, and it has a built-in SSL certificate. If you're interested in that, go to transistor.fm.